They say time heals all wounds. I say time just teaches you how to carry them. Now I ain't no scholar. I never sat in big classrooms with chalkboards and degrees on the wall. But I've lived long enough to know that pain can shape a woman or break her. That love ain't always sweet. That people who promise forever can disappear before dinner's on the table. I've been a daughter no one wanted. A wife someone left behind. A mother with one hand on the cradle and the other scrubbing someone else's floor. But I've also been a quiet storm. A builder of legacies. A soft place for my children to land, and the hardest lesson their daddy ever learned. This ain't just a story about abandonment or betrayal. It's about what happens after. What happens when a woman refuses to be defined by the folks who walked away. It's about how I, Essie Mae Turner, rose from being sold as a child to being the rock of a family that outshined the one I was left for. It's about how silence became strength, how grace became my revenge, and how one day, long after the man who broke me came crawling back, I gave him a seat at the table, but not a place in my heart. So pull up a chair, sugar. This ain't no fairy tale. But it's a story worth telling. Because sometimes the best revenge is living well enough for them to choke on their own regret. If you've ever felt forgotten, pushed aside, or forced to rebuild from nothing, this story is for you. And if it ain't your story, I bet it's someone you know. Someone who needs to hear that survival ain't shameful, and rising again is still possible. We ain't just telling this for entertainment. We're telling it to lift somebody up. To let them know they're not alone in the mess. So go ahead and hit that share button. Leave a comment below. Let us know if you see yourself or someone you love in this story. I was only 7 when my own daddy sold me. Said it was for my good. Sent me off to live with a white family like I was a stray dog looking for shelter. You ever been handed over like an old mop? Not broken. Not dirty. Just no longer needed in the house? That's how it happened to me. It was a hot June morning in 1948. Mississippi heat so thick it made your skin stick to the air, and your prayers cling to your tongue. I remember sitting on the front steps, my knees dusty, chewing on a piece of sugar cane Mama had given me. She stood behind me, brushing my hair out on the porch with hands that trembled, not from age or illness, but from sorrow. She kept running that old wooden comb through my curls, like she was trying to smooth the truth out my head. I asked her, "Mama, why you crying?" She just said, "'Cause the Lord made you too precious, baby. Too precious for this world." I didn't understand what she meant, until my daddy came out. He wasn't a cruel man, not with his fists. But he had a coldness to him, a silence that could make you shiver in the middle of July. He walked out holding a suitcase he packed for me, not with toys or my favorite rag doll, but with a faded Sunday dress, 2 pairs of socks, a Bible with torn pages, and a tin of lard biscuits wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. He looked me in the eye and said, "Essie Mae, you gon' live with the Parkers now. They got a big house and they need help. You gonna learn real responsibility." I blinked. "But I wanna stay here, with you, with Mama." He cleared his throat, looked away. Couldn't meet my eyes. "They pay him good. You'll be all right. You make us proud now, you hear?" And just like that, I was loaded into the backseat of a car that wasn't ours. I remember the smell of peppermint and gasoline. The white lady in front didn't smile. The man driving didn't speak. And me? I held my biscuit tin like it was my last connection to home. My last anchor in a sea I didn't know I was about to be thrown into. I wasn't adopted. I wasn't fostered. I wasn't sent to school or camp. I was placed. Like a pot on a shelf. The Parkers had a daughter my age. Blonde curls. Pink bows. She had a canopy bed with lace curtains, a room full of porcelain dolls, and a toy chest that could bury a child. I slept on a cot in the laundry room. Woke up at 5 a.m. every day to scrub floors with soap and cold water that burned my hands until they cracked. They called me Essie when they were being decent. Most days I was just girl, or you there. You ever seen a child disappear? Not from the earth, but from being seen? That was me. I learned early that crying made people angry. that asking questions meant punishment, that you say yes ma'am with a smile even if your stomach growls loud enough to echo, that your worth was tied to how clean the floors were, how quiet you kept. There were nights I'd whisper into the dark, "Mama, come get me." But she never did. Not 'cause she didn't want to, but 'cause she couldn't. Maybe she cried herself to sleep too. They said I was lucky. Said I was being given an opportunity. But ain't no opportunity when your childhood becomes currency. When you're told your small brown hands are better suited for dishwashing than for drawing or dancing. When you start to believe that servitude is all you were born for. I scrubbed baseboards till I could see my reflection in them. They say children are meant to be seen, not heard. But in that house I was sent to, I wasn't meant to be either. I was just a shadow with a rag in her hand, a whisper in the hallway, a pair of hands that scrubbed and polished, not a voice that asked or a heart that needed. I remember standing on a stool to reach the sink. The water burned my hands, but I didn't dare complain. Complaining got you slapped. Silence kept you standing. Silence kept you fed. Barely. Mrs. Baker had a son named Henry. He was about 13, lanky and mean. He thought it was funny to trip me, throw mud on the floors after I'd cleaned them, even lock me in the pantry when his parents weren't home. Once, he pulled my braid so hard I cried out. His mother walked in, saw me on the floor, and said, "Essie, you're too sensitive." They made me sleep with the door locked from the outside. I think they were afraid I'd run. But where would I go? I didn't know the street, didn't know anyone. And deep down, I still believed my daddy would come back for me. That belief kept me from falling apart until the day I overheard a visitor say to Mrs. Baker, "So this is the girl you got for $20? That was the moment I stopped being a child. That was the moment I knew I wasn't sent there for kindness. I was sold like a second-hand broom. But I didn't scream. I didn't protest. I just scrubbed harder. I noticed everything. Mrs. Baker liked to spike her tea with gin when Mr. Baker was away. Baker only came home twice a week and never looked me in the eye. Henry stole coins from his father's drawer and blamed the gardener. I kept their secrets better than their locks did. And still, I was invisible. Until it suited them not to be. When company came, they'd parade me out like I was part of a charity act. "This is Essie. We took her in," Mrs. Baker would say with pride, like I was a stray they'd rescued. But when the guests left, I went right back to scrubbing the bathroom tiles with a toothbrush. One winter, I caught the flu. Burned with fever for 3 days in the attic, no doctor, no soup, no visits. On the 4th day, I crawled down to clean the fireplace. Mrs. Baker looked at me with surprise. "You're not dead? Good. There's soot on the rug." That was my kind of childhood. I lived in that house until I was 17. No birthday cakes, no school dances, no real schooling at all if I'm honest. Just enough reading to follow recipes and enough math to make change at the market. They said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. When I turned 18, Mrs. Baker told me I should be grateful for what they'd done, and wished me well with a used suitcase and $5 tucked in a Bible I hadn't ever seen them open. So I left. No plan. No place to go. Just freedom that tasted like fear, and a world that didn't know my name. I found a room in the back of Miss Letty's beauty parlor. $10 a month, and I cleaned up hair clippings to earn most of it. I did day work for old folks who needed their windows washed or clothes pressed. I worked hard, kept my head down, stayed out of trouble. But it was lonely. The kind of lonely that makes your bones ache at night. I didn't have nobody, not a friend, not a family member checking in, just me, my hands, and the will to survive. I wasn't looking for love, I wasn't even looking for kindness. I just wanted to make it to the next day. But the something remarkable happened. You ever meet somebody who smiles at you like they already know you? Like they've been waiting on you their whole life? That was Curtis. It was a Tuesday. Springtime, I think. The kind of day where the wind smells like jasmine and the sky don't dare frown. I was standing in line at the old Piggly Wiggly, holding 2 cans of beans, a box of rice, and a bottle of cooking oil. That's all I could afford that day, and I was calculating every nickel in my head like my life depended on it, because back then, it did. Then he walked up behind me, tapped his change against the side of his thigh like he had music playing just for him. Like the whole world moved to his rhythm. "You always shop on Tuesdays?" he asked, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I turned halfway, gave him a look that was more exhaustion than invitation, but he smiled anyway. A bright, easy smile. He had a gap in his teeth. It made his face softer, friendlier, like he wouldn't hurt a fly. I said, he continued, like I hadn't just tried to ignore him, "You always shop on Tuesdays, Miss Lady?" I remember I didn't say a word for a moment. Then I finally muttered, "You gonna pay for these groceries or just talk me to death?" He laughed, loud and real, like he wasn't embarrassed to feel joy out in public. That was rare, especially where I came from. Most men had their joy knocked out of them by the time they were 15. "Now that's a woman with fire," he said. I liked that. I rolled my eyes and turned back around. I was nobody's fire. I was just tired bones in an apron with dreams I didn't even dare name. But somehow, that man saw something in me, at least at first. He stepped forward, leaned a little closer and whispered, "My name's Curtis, and you look like somebody who don't belong in lines like these. Somebody who should be walking red carpets, or at least shopping with 2 full bags." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. No one had ever told me I deserved more, not without a condition. Not without expecting something in return. I hadn't felt worthy of more since I was sold for $5 in a second-hand coat. Curtis paid for my groceries that day. Slid a few bills onto the counter with a kind of pride I hadn't seen in years. I told him I didn't need a man to do that, but truth is I'd been praying for a blessing, and maybe he was just that, or so I thought. We started talking, every Tuesday like clockwork. Then talking turned into long walks home. Then walks turned into shared lunches in the park. Then kisses by the lake. One day he asked me if I'd be his wife, just like that. No big fancy ring, no down on one knee, just a whisper at sunset, "You feel like home to me." And Lord help me, I said yes. We got married in a little church. I wore a borrowed dress, and he looked at me like I was royalty. I still remember the scent of lilies in the air and the way the old pianist played Blessed Assurance like the keys were confessions. I remember his vows. Said I was his heart, his home, his safe place. I clung to those words like a lifeline. No one had ever made me feel chosen before. Not even my own daddy. When I looked at Curtis, I didn't see a savior. I saw a partner. Someone to share the burdens and the blessings. For a while, it was beautiful. He'd leave me love notes on the fridge, call me sunshine in the mornings, rub my back when my feet hurt. He'd bring me peaches in a paper bag from the farmer's market and say, "Couldn't walk past these without thinking of you." I believed him. Every word. Because when you grow up learning how to survive, love feels like a miracle. And I thought I'd finally found mine. But the thing about Curtis is, he knew how to begin a story real good. Just didn't know how to stay till the end. It started small, missed dinners, forgotten birthdays, a long stare at the waitress that lingered a little too long. Then came the silence. Thick and stifling. The kind that made the air in the house feel like it had teeth. And I made excuses for him, for the coldness, for the distance, told myself he was tired, stressed, needed space. What I didn't know was that love, real love, don't vanish when life gets hard. It digs in deeper. It plants roots. Curtis? He was already easing his way out. Still I held on, because I remembered that grocery line, that gap-toothed smile. The boy who said I looked like royalty when I felt like rags. I didn't know then, but I was holding on to a ghost. I remember that day like it was pressed into my soul with a branding iron. Not just a memory, but a scar that still tingles when the weather changes, or when I hear a certain song play on the radio. The day Curtis vanished wasn't loud. It wasn't full of drama or final words thrown like daggers. No, it was quiet. Eerily quiet. And that's what made it hurt more. The morning started like any other. I was up before dawn, moving like a ghost through the kitchen. My hands stirred the grits without thinking. The kettle sang its usual tune, and I hummed low to myself, hoping it would drown out the ache in my back and the weight of a baby pressing on my bladder. I had 4 kids already: James, Ruthie, Marcus, and little Leona, and another on the way. That house was full of life and noise and mess, but there was something about that morning that felt hollow. Curtis hadn't come home the night before. Again. He'd been staying out more often, saying work was keeping him late. Then it became, I need space, and later, you don't understand me. But I understood more than he thought. I knew the smell of another woman's perfume. I knew the way his eyes shifted when he lied. And I knew the sound of distance. Not the kind that measures miles, but the kind that grows like mold between 2 people who once shared the same bed, the same breath. Still, I set the table. His plate sat at the head, just like always. Scrambled eggs with cheese, smoked sausage, and a biscuit I'd stayed up late baking. I don't know why I did it. Maybe habit, maybe hope, maybe just stubborn love that didn't know when to give up. By noon, I started calling. His job hadn't seen him. His brother gave me a nervous laugh and said, maybe he just needed to clear his head. His mother didn't even pretend to be surprised. Curtis always did run from responsibility. He's his daddy's son through and through, she said like it was gospel. I paced that front porch for hours, my belly heavy, my heart heavier. I looked up every time a car passed. Every time the wind shifted. Every sound made me hope and hurt at the same time. Night came. I locked the door, not out of anger, but out of finality. I told myself, if he walks through that door now, it'll be too late. But I still left the porch light on. Foolish, I know. The next morning, his toothbrush was still on the sink. His boots sat by the door. His cologne lingered in the hallway like a ghost. But he was gone. Gone in the kind of way you don't prepare for. No bags packed. No note. No goodbye. Just disappeared. I sat on the edge of our bed and stared at the wall. My body was aching. My ankles swollen. The baby kicked like it knew something was wrong. And the silence? It screamed. The worst part wasn't that he left, it was how he left. No closure. No conversation, just absence. Like I had been a season he got tired of. Like he woke up one day and decided, I don't want this life anymore. And he just walked out of it like you walk out of a movie you're no longer enjoying. I had to look my kids in the eye and lie. Daddy's working late, Daddy's on a trip. Daddy will be home soon. But children are smart. They knew, they felt it before I admitted it. Leona cried in her sleep. Marcus stopped asking questions. Ruthie started staring out the window more. James, he got angry, real angry. And I didn't blame him. I was angry too, but I didn't have time to fall apart. I had a baby coming, and I was all they had. At night, I'd sit on the porch and talk to God. Not in polished prayers, but in real, raw words. Lord, don't let me break. Don't let this bitterness grow roots. Don't let me become hard. I still don't know how I made it through those months. Maybe it was faith, maybe it was rage turned into fuel. Maybe it was just the stubborn part of me that refused to let Curtis's absence define my worth. But one thing I knew for sure. He left me with 5 mouths to feed. And I was gonna raise 5 reasons why he'd regret it. You ever feel a chill in your chest before you even hear the news? Like your spirit already knows what your ears ain't ready to handle? That's how it happened the day I found out about Georgia. It was a Thursday, humid like a wet sponge and thick with stillness. The kind of day where the cicadas hum too loud like they know something you don't. I was hanging laundry on the line. 2 shirts, 3 socks, 1 dress, and a baby onesie with a stubborn stain I'd scrubbed raw. James was chasing Ruth with a plastic spoon. My belly, heavy with my 5th child, dragged with the kind of weariness no nap could fix. Loretta Jackson came by, all perfume and purpose. She walked like someone who had news, important news, and needed to offload it fast before her mouth dried up. I ain't one to meddle, she said, not even bothering to make eye contact, which meant she was about to meddle deep. She cleared her throat. You know Curtis done gone and married again, right? My hands froze on the clothespin. The wind stopped. Even the flies went silent. Married? I asked, soft, like maybe I hadn't heard her right. Some woman out in Georgia, Beverly or Brenda, something like that. She got 2 boys from another man, but your Curtis, he treating them like kings. I didn't cry. Not then, not in front of Loretta. I smiled, thanked her for coming by, told her to grab some of the sweetbread cooling on the windowsill. But when she left, I went inside, locked the door, and screamed into a pillow until my throat gave out. My chest burned. My eyes went dry. And then I sat, still as stone, just sat. He married her. No divorce papers, no knock on the door, not even a whisper of goodbye. He walked out one night with his work boots slung over his shoulder, told me he'd be back before dark, and never came home. That was nearly 9 months ago. I'd been carrying his child and his shame every day since. Turns out he hadn't disappeared. He'd relocated, started over, moved to Georgia like he was shedding skin, like we were the illness and she was the cure. And her? Beverly. I'd never met her, but I'd heard enough. She had light brown eyes and a high school diploma, used to work in retail, now ran a hair salon, divorced young, had 2 boys. Rashad and Malik, 10 and 8. Smart mouths but good kids, folks said. The kind that played outside and said yes ma'am. And Curtis? Oh, he was a whole new man. Signed him up for Little League, bought matching bikes, sat in PTA meetings and helped with homework. Folks in town said he was a devoted father. A changed man. A man of God. Some even called him Pastor Curtis, even though he never preached a day in his life. Funny, isn't it? That man never once attended a parent-teacher meeting for Ruth. Never asked James about his favorite subject. He missed Sarah's first words, Elijah's first steps. Said he was too tired, too broke, too busy. But in Georgia, he found time, money, and energy to love another woman's children like they were royal heirs. I used to sit up at night thinking, what did she give him that I didn't? Maybe she never raised her voice. Maybe she smiled through the pain better than I did. Maybe she ironed his shirts just right. Or maybe she wasn't better. Maybe she was just new. Because some men, they don't want love, they want escape. They want clean slates and fresh starts. They want homes with no reminders of who they failed to be. They want applause for things they never did at home. They want to be heroes somewhere else. Curtis thought he could run away and reinvent himself, and he did, for a while. He took care of her, paid her bills, kissed her boys goodnight and braided her hair on Sundays, bought her flowers from the Piggly Wiggly every Thursday, built her a garden. Meanwhile, I was boiling beans over a single burner, praying the gas wouldn't run out before dinner finished. My hands cracked from washing clothes, my feet swollen from standing too long. My heart, numb. One day, Sarah came home crying. She was barely 6, said a girl at school told her, "Your daddy's in Georgia with his real family." That stung. Because they were his real family. But I held Sarah, kissed her curls, and said, "Baby, your daddy might have left, but we ain't lost. We're just getting started." And we did. Curtis didn't know it then, but every time he paid for another child's braces or clapped for Rashad's baseball games, he was investing in my comeback. I worked for folks who barely knew my name, cleaned houses that smelled like lemon polish and regret, scrubbed floors so long I could close my eyes and still feel the rhythm of the brush against tile. Some of them folks talked to me like I was dirt. One woman even left notes instead of speaking, but I never flinched. My mission was greater than my ego. In the evenings I'd come home to a house that barely felt like one. We had one mattress between 5 of us, and it was torn in 2 places. The springs poked like thorns, but it was ours. I made rice stretch like it was magic. Sometimes, dinner was just grits and boiled cabbage, but I seasoned it with love. That's what kept us fed. At night, after tucking the kids in, I pulled out my folding chair and started braiding. Little girls from the neighborhood would sit between my knees while I parted, oiled, and twisted their hair. They'd talk about boys, teachers, and dreams bigger than our block. $10 a head if they wanted beads. $5 if they brought their own grease. I braided until my fingertips went numb. I never turned anyone away. I saved every dollar I made in a coffee tin I kept behind the flour. Sometimes I'd count it at midnight just to remind myself it was real, that we were climbing, even if it was inch by inch. There was a time James came home crying because the kids laughed at his shoes, said the soles were talking. I kneeled right then, took off my own shoes and gave them to him. Told him, "You ain't never gonna be ashamed of what you got. You wear those with pride, you hear me? You walk like you own every sidewalk." Ruth once asked why we didn't have lights when other folks did. I told her, "Baby, 'cause we glowing on the inside." She giggled, and I held on to that sound like a lifeline. You see, I didn't just raise children. I built them brick by brick. I laid down courage, mixed in grace, and topped it with grit. They knew who they were, not because of what they had, but because of who their mama was. When school awards came, we clapped the loudest. When fevers hit, I sat by their sides with cool rags and whispered old songs my mama used to sing. When they had nightmares, I wrapped them in my arms and told them we were safe, even when I wasn't sure myself. There was no child support. No help. Just me and God and a whole lot of willpower. Sometimes I prayed so hard my knees burned. Sometimes I cried so silent, not even the walls heard. But I kept going. Because what was the choice? They say poverty is loud. But you know what's louder? Determination. That relentless thump in your chest when you're standing in a worn-down kitchen, scraping the last bit of rice into a pot and praying it stretches. That whisper that turns into a roar when your child brings home a grade, maybe not the one the world claps for, but one you know they bled for. That's what we had. Not luxury, not convenience, but soul-deep determination. I remember the day James, my oldest, brought home a report card with straight C's and one hard-earned B in history. He came in holding that paper like a medal, his eyes searching mine for approval. That boy had been working part-time at Mr. Taylor's tire shop since he turned 14, waking up at 5 a.m., rolling tires heavier than his own frame, then dragging himself to school, still smelling like rubber and grease. That D in math? That wasn't failure. That was fatigue. That was perseverance in a letter. I looked at him and said, "You brought home more than grades today. You brought home evidence. Evidence that you don't quit." That night, we had ourselves a celebration. It wasn't fried chicken and collard greens like the old days. We couldn't afford that. But I made magic with what we had. Boiled rice, a single can of black beans, and the last sliver of smoked turkey leg that had been hiding in the freezer since Thanksgiving. I lit our one emergency candle, stuck it in an old jelly jar, and we feasted like royalty. I told them, "Don't let the world shame you out of your joy. If we wait for perfection, we'll never celebrate nothing." Then there was Ruth, my second born. Lord, that child had fire in her feet. At 12, she was already braiding hair on the porch for pocket change. She'd sit her friends down on a crate, pull out my old comb and some hair grease, and twist up masterpieces like she was born with magic in her fingers. By 15, she was cleaning houses on weekends. Woke up before sunrise, took the city bus 2 neighborhoods over, and scrubbed toilets and mopped floors till her hands were raw. Never complained. Just came home and dropped crumpled dollar bills in a jar behind the flour tin. One day I caught her counting $243.52 in ones, fives, and coins. I didn't say a word. Just kissed her forehead that night as she slept and cried into my apron. At 16, she launched Ruth's Royal Touch, a one-woman show doing hair, cleaning houses, and even sewing curtains for the neighborhood ladies. She passed out flyers printed at the corner store and left them everywhere, even slid one in the mailbox of the woman Curtis ran off with. That same woman called, asking for Ruth's services. I let her take the job. Told her to walk in proud and charge her full rate, plus tip. We weren't here to grovel. We were here to rise. My third child, Micah, was quieter, bookish. Got picked on for carrying a library card instead of a basketball. But that boy read everything. Encyclopedias, cookbooks, poetry. He once told me, "Mama, reading is how I time travel." Today he writes for a newspaper up north. The same one that once ignored people who look like us. And little Elijah, my baby, the one Curtis never met. That child had creativity stitched into his soul. I caught him once cutting up my old pillowcases and turning them into doll dresses for Ruth's old toys. I didn't scold him. I sat beside him and watched. Today, he's a fashion designer. Got his own line and everything. I still can't spell half the brands he wears, but I know pride when I feel it. We didn't have matching plates or a dishwasher. We had dishpans, mismatched forks, and a kitchen full of laughter. Our meals weren't fancy, but they were holy. Every grain of rice blessed, every pot stirred with hope. The walls of our house heard every tear I cried, but they also echoed every victory shout. We clapped for passing grades, danced for new jobs, and turned utility bill extensions into parades. I used to say, we might be broke, but we're not broken. And now, James speaks at conferences. Ruth employs single mothers. Micah writes truth into the world. Elijah creates beauty out of cloth, all from the womb of a woman who once cleaned toilets for nickels. Now, before I go any further, let me pause right here and say this. This story I'm telling, it ain't just about Curtis, and it sure ain't just about me. It's about you, or someone you know who's been left, overlooked, used up, or told they ain't worth staying for. It's about every woman carrying the weight of a home alone. Every child wondering why their daddy never came back. Every heart trying to heal in silence. We're sharing this story because we believe somebody out there needs to hear it. Not for drama, not for views, but because healing starts with honesty. And when you see someone survive what you're going through, you remember you can make it too. So if this part of the story speaks to you, don't scroll past. Drop a comment, share it with someone who needs hope. Let's continue the discussion. Because your voice matters. Every time we speak, we help someone else find the strength to keep going. Because sometimes all it takes is one story to remind someone they're not alone. Let's continue. It was a Sunday afternoon, hot and heavy, the sun sitting on the steeple of Mount Olive Baptist like it had nowhere better to be. The service had ended an hour ago, but I was still lingering near the fellowship hall, waving my fan and waiting on Sister Geraldine. I wasn't expecting any trouble. I surely wasn't expecting a ghost from my past to be the topic of small talk. I had just sipped on some watered-down sweet tea when Sister Lucille, with her church hat tilted and lipstick just barely inside the lines, came sliding beside me like gossip was pulling her forward. "Essie," she said, low and slow, "you heard about Curtis?" My fan froze midair. For a second, I thought maybe I heard wrong. I hadn't heard that name said out loud in over a decade. Folks around here had learned to keep it off their tongues when I walked into a room. That name had once been my promise and then my curse. I had scrubbed it off my soul like mildew from tile, but somehow, Lucille had just brought the mold right back in. "What about him?" I asked, my voice calm but my stomach doing flips like it had back when I was carrying our fifth baby, and Curtis disappeared into thin air. Lucille gave a little look over her shoulder, leaned in like what she was about to say was both sacred and scandalous. "He'd been put out." I blinked. "Put out where?" "Atlanta," she whispered. "That woman he ran off with? The light-skinned one with the real estate license? Well, her ex-husband came back from prison. They rekindled. Told Curtis to pack his bags and go. Said she didn't owe him a thing. Changed the locks, threw his clothes in a trash bag, and had her new old man toss him on the porch." I stared at her, expressionless. But inside me, 1,000 things moved. Lucille kept going, voice dropping lower like she was slipping deeper into someone else's shame. "They say Curtis been sleeping in his car. Down to the Chevron off Old Peachtree. Man done lost his job months ago, didn't tell nobody. She was carrying all the bills, and when she cut him off, it all came crumbling." Ain't that something? The same man who looked me in the face all those years ago, then walked away without a word. Left me pregnant, barefoot, with 4 babies clinging to my dress hem, had now been left out on a sidewalk like yesterday's trash. And now Lucille's eyes narrowed. "You know what the folks are whisperin'? That he talkin' about comin' back down here. That maybe he gone show up on your porch. Essie said he wants to make peace. Peace. That word rolled through me like a splinter, because peace ain't a one-time handshake or a sorry whispered into stale coffee. Peace is earned. Built. Brick by heavy brick. And he? He left when my bricks were dust. Well, I finally said, life got a way of returning borrowed pain, don't it? Lucille chuckled, but she knew there was more behind my calm than I let on. She patted my shoulder and moved on. But her words stayed. That evening, I sat on my porch as the sun bowed down behind the trees. I watched the street for no reason. Just stared. Thinking. Not about Curtis, not really. But about how life circles back. How the things we run from have a way of finding us barefoot and broke. I didn't tell my children. Didn't want them stirred up. James would have gotten in the car and gone looking for Curtis himself. Ruth would have prayed for rain on that man's head. But I knew in my bones. Curtis was coming. Not because he missed me, not because he loved me, but because I was the last shelter he remembered. And this time, the door would open on my terms. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had the windows open, the gospel playing soft from the radio, and a pot of greens bubbling low on the stove. Peaceful. That was the word. Peaceful. Until I heard a knock. Not the kind of knock you get from neighbors or grandkids. No. This knock had weight to it. It didn't tap. It thudded, like it was dragging shame behind every pound. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, glanced at the front window, and there he was. Curtis. Standing on my porch like he never walked off it. Wearing a sun-faded cap, shoulders hunched like the years had folded him down, and a shirt that had seen better days. Just like him. His belly poked through where a button used to be, and those once proud eyes? Dull. Tired. A man who'd run out of roads. But the thing that hit me hardest wasn't his clothes or his age, it was his face. That grin. The same one he used to flash when he'd come home late, smelling like another woman and daring me to ask about it. Only now that grin had gaps, his front tooth gone, his bottom row leaning like old fence posts, yet there was no apology in his eyes, just audacity. "Hey, Essie," he said, like I was supposed to jump and hug him. "You look good." I didn't say nothing at first, just looked at him. Took my time, studied him like he was a memory trying to come back but getting all the details wrong. Behind me, my youngest grandson, Khalil, peeked around the hallway. "Who dat, Grandma?" I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. "It's no one, baby. Just a ghost from the past." Curtis chuckled like I was making a joke. I wasn't. He started talking, real fast then. Said things like he'd fallen on hard times. That his second marriage didn't work out. That her ex came back and she chose blood over bond. That he didn't have nowhere to go, and thought maybe he'd come back to the one woman who ever truly stood by him. Imagine that. The man who packed up and vanished when I was carrying his child. Standing there asking for a fresh start like this was a movie, and he was the misunderstood hero. Like 28 years of silence could be erased with a smile missing a tooth. I looked him in the eye and asked, "You remember where you left us, Curtis? Me and them 4 babies, plus one in my belly?" He scratched his neck. Looked down. "Essie, I didn't know how to handle." No, don't lie to me on my porch," I said, sharper than a blade. "You didn't want to handle it, that's what it was." He shuffled his feet, still grinning, like that would soften the moment. But I wasn't 23 no more. I wasn't scared or unsure. I was a woman who had built a life out of dust. And he could feel it too. "I was hoping maybe you'd let me stay for a while. Just till I get on my feet," he said, barely above a whisper. The nerve. Curtis, who left me with food stamps, 3 jobs, and a broken heart, was now asking for refuge in the house built by the very children he abandoned. I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted the silence to speak. I wanted him to stand on that porch and feel the weight of everything he threw away. "You can stay," I finally said. His eyes lit up like he won the lottery. "But only as long as you understand. This ain't your home. It never was. This house belongs to the woman you left behind and the 5 children you never called." He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. You don't get to rewrite the story, Curtis. You're just a footnote now. Then I opened the door, not to let him in, but to let him see what he missed. Photos of graduations, weddings, birthdays, smiles that didn't include him, walls filled with joy he had no part in creating. And for the first time I saw it on his face. Not guilt, not regret, loss. True, aching, soul-deep loss. Because ghosts don't just knock, they come back trying to haunt the life they abandoned, only to find out the house has already been exorcised. He sat there at my kitchen table, hunched over, staring into a chipped mug of coffee. Same mug I sipped from every morning after sending my kids to school. Same mug I held when I cried alone at night, wondering how I'd ever make it. Now he held it like it was a lifeline. I watched him. That once proud man, the one who used to walk with his chest puffed up and his cologne trailing behind him like he was somebody important, he was gone. In his place was a tired man with a soft belly, sunken eyes, and skin that had lost its glow. "Come on," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "I want to show you something." He looked up. Slow, uncertain, like a man being led to judgment. Maybe he thought I was going to show him other pictures of our kids' college degrees. Or read him a letter one of them wrote me for Mother's Day. But no, this wasn't about their words. This was about my work. I led him through the house, my house, not ours, mine. Every tile, every picture frame, every coat of paint had a story. I built that place from nothing. Nothing but broken promises, late-night prayers, and a spine that refused to bend. The screen door creaked open, the sound slicing the silence like a truth long overdue. Outside, the sun was starting to rise high, spilling gold across the backyard. Birds chirped, wind whispered. It was peaceful, and there it stood. A house. Not a big one, not fancy, but solid. Two-bedroom guest house I had built with the money I saved sewing clothes, baking cakes, cleaning houses, braiding hair, and doing every odd job I could get without a degree or a man. Brick by brick, year by year I built it. Curtis squinted unsure. I walked ahead, the grass crunching under my feet. "This," I said, waving my hand like a preacher revealing the promised land. "This is what I did with what you left me." He didn't say a word. His eyes scanned the small house, the flower boxes, the rocking chair on the porch, the fresh coat of paint. He looked like he wanted to ask how, but his mouth stayed shut. So I told him, "You see that window?" James hung it his first summer back from college. He used his bare hands, same hands you once said were too soft to be a man's. Ruth helped me mix the cement the week she launched her salon. Micah painted the porch with his scholarship award money. Every part of this house has their fingerprints. The same kids you left for dead. I could see the weight of it settling on him, the disbelief, the regret. I stepped closer. I didn't get no help, no child support, no weekend visits, no birthday cards, not even a damn phone call. You disappeared, Curtis. You didn't just leave me, you erased us. He flinched. Good, but you know what? I continued. That was the moment I found my power. I stopped waiting for someone to fix it. I became the fix. I ran my hand along the doorframe. This ain't just a house, it's a monument, a reminder that you may have been the storm, but I was the tree that refused to fall. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I turned to him, and my voice softened, not out of pity, but truth. You see, when you left, I thought I was broken, but turns out I was being rebuilt. God didn't let me crumble, He gave me tools. They just didn't look like tools at first. They looked like hunger and work and tears. But baby, those were my blueprints. Curtis stared at the house, and I stared at him. So no, I don't need you to say sorry. I don't need explanations. I needed you then. I don't need you now, but I do need you to see what I became when you thought I was nothing. He nodded slowly, and for once the man who always had something slick to say said nothing at all. And that silence, that was the sweetest sound I ever heard. Now, don't let nobody tell you that revenge gotta come with a knife or some loud scene in the street. Sometimes, the best revenge walks on soft feet, wearing house slippers. Curtis stayed, not because I begged him, not because I forgave him, no. He stayed because he had nowhere else to go. I let him stay, for my own reasons. Now don't get it twisted. I didn't welcome him into my bed or my heart. I welcomed him into my house like you welcome a storm cloud. You keep one eye on it, just in case it tries to come inside and ruin your floor. He slept in the guest room, and every morning, I gave him a list. Dishes, laundry, lawn, trash, windows, sweeping, mopping, dusting, grocery runs if I felt generous. At first he tried to act like he was doing me a favor. Said things like, "Ain't no big deal, Essie, I'm just helping out." I looked him square in the eye and said, "Curtis, you're not helping, you're repaying." I made sure he scrubbed every corner he never noticed when he lived here. I watched him mop the very floor where I once cried, 8 months pregnant, wondering if we'd eat dinner that night. I saw him bend to clean the baseboards. Those same baseboards he once stepped over without a thought when he used to stomp out after a fight. He folded my clothes, hung up the sheets, woke up early to make breakfast, but never quite got my coffee right. I still drank it, though, just to watch his face when I said, "Maybe tomorrow it'll taste like love instead of leftovers." My grandbabies, God bless 'em, started calling him Mr. Essie. Not Grandpa, not Pops, not Daddy, just Mr. Essie. "Mr. Essie, you done with the vacuum?" "Mr. Essie, Grandma say you missed a spot on the porch." "Mr. Essie, can you iron my choir shirt?" He hated it, I could tell. But he smiled that tight-lipped smile and nodded like he had a choice. He had no title anymore, just a job. One evening he tried to sit in my recliner. I didn't say a word, just stood there, arms folded, with the television remote in my hand. After a few seconds he got up slow, muttering something about his back, and sat on the wooden chair near the kitchen. That's where he stayed every evening, like a man waiting for something that never came. You see, what Curtis didn't realize was this. I had already buried the version of him I used to love. One night, he came to me with tears in his eyes, said, "Essie, I ain't never deserved you. I see that now." I said, "That's all right, Curtis. You ain't got to deserve me. Just clean behind the fridge tomorrow." By the end of 3 months, my house had never been cleaner. My garden had never looked better. My peace had never been louder. Then, one morning, I woke up to find his bag packed by the door. He said he was leaving. Said he had to find his own place. Try to get his life back. I handed him a sandwich for the road. He paused and asked, "You ever think we could have made it if I stayed?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Curtis, you didn't stay. And that's the part that never gets fixed." He nodded, walked out, quiet this time, and I sat down in my chair, sipped my hot coffee the way I like it, and smiled. Sometimes the sweetest revenge ain't loud. It's watching the man who thought you couldn't live without him realize you lived better without him than he ever did without you. "Can you come up and share a word, Mother Essie?" That was how it started. Just a small request from Pastor Daniels during Women of Valor Sunday. I hadn't planned to speak. I was just there to clap and hum and rock gently in my pew like I always did. But when the pastor called my name, something stirred inside me. Like the Holy Spirit pulled my spine straight and whispered, "Now is the time." I walked up to that pulpit slow but steady. My knees ain't what they used to be, but that morning, they carried me like they knew I was about to set something free. The mic squeaked as I touched it. I cleared my throat and looked out. I saw Sister Lorraine from the front row, who always brings peach cobbler to Bible study. I saw Deacon Harris, who lost his wife last year. I saw my children, my heartbeats, lined up in the 3rd row, dressed like royalty. My name is Essie Mae. Some of y'all know me as the lady who brings lemon cake to every church cookout. Some know me as Mama, some as Grandma, some just call me Miss Essie, but today I want to tell you who I really am. I was sold when I was 7, not trafficked, not kidnapped, sold, by my own daddy, said I was just one mouth too many. I became a housemaid in a white family's home, learned to cook, clean, keep quiet, and survive. I didn't go to prom, never had a sleepover. I grew up scrubbing floors instead of jumping rope, but I didn't break. A man came along when I was in my 20s, promised me love, promised me forever, gave me 5 children, but couldn't stay long enough to watch them grow. One day, he just left. No letter, no goodbye, just vanished, left me pregnant and praying. I paused there. The sanctuary was silent. Not even a cough, not a shuffle, just breath and stillness. I raised 5 babies alone. Cleaned houses, took in sewing, sold pies. I wore hand-me-down shoes with pride because my kids had new ones. I gave them bedtime stories when I had no energy left, and I held them through nights I wanted to fall apart. And you know what? They grew. They rose. One became a doctor. Another opened her own business. My baby boy's in the Navy. My Ruth, she just bought me my first car. At 67, I learned to drive. I built kings and queens from dust. And God saw every tear I cried into my pillow. He collected them like rain and turned them into rivers of strength. I paused again. My eyes flicked to the back row. Curtis was looking up now. His eyes glistened like mine. But I didn't flinch. I kept going. The man who left me? He came back. Yeah, he did. Thought he could pick up where he left off. Thought maybe now that I was whole, he could be part of the healing. But let me say this for any woman in this room who ever felt less than. You are not a backup plan. You are not a waiting room for broken men to gather themselves. I forgave him. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed room to breathe. I fed him, gave him shelter, even let him sweep my floors. But my heart stayed guarded, because healing don't always mean reunion. Now some folks were crying. Sister Lorraine wiped her eyes with a silk handkerchief. My daughter Ruth was sobbing quietly into her husband's arm. God don't forget the brokenhearted. He doesn't ignore the widow or the weary. When I had nothing, He gave me everything. When I was weak, He planted strength in my children. And when the world called me worthless, God called me chosen. I am not what happened to me, I am what I became, despite it. And if you're here today feeling like you're invisible, just know, somebody's watching. Your child is watching, your neighbor is watching, God is watching, and your story ain't over yet. By the time I stepped down from that pulpit, there wasn't a dry eye in the sanctuary. That was my testimony, my triumph, my revenge, not with rage, but with grace, glory, and God. I wasn't expecting anything that morning, just another quiet Tuesday, birds fussing on the windowsill, and my kettle singing its usual tune. I was in the middle of slicing sweet potatoes when James walked in with the mail. He handed me a plain, cream-colored envelope with no return address. Just my name, written in a shaky cursive that looked like it wasn't used to saying sorry. I opened it slow. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded once like it didn't want to be read. But baby, the words inside, they hit like thunder on a dry day. Essie Mae, I know I got no right to write you. You don't know me. But I know you. I know your name. I know your children's names. I know the birthdays Curtis forgot and the tears you must have swallowed alone. I met Curtis in a bus station back in '89. He looked like a man trying to outrun something. I thought I could be his peace. I didn't know I was just his next shelter. He never told me the whole truth. Bits and pieces came out over the years, always with a slant to make himself the victim. I believed him. Lord help me, I did. I let him into my house, into my life, into my children's lives. I thought he was changing. I thought I was lucky. But Essie, he never changed. He just got better at pretending. I stopped reading for a second. My hands were trembling. Not out of pain, not out of anger. Just disbelief. That after all these years, someone else had seen the same cracks in him I did. And now they were showing her the same cold truth. I tried to love him. I tried to cover the holes in him with faith, patience, even silence. But you can't patch a broken man with good intentions. My son from my first marriage, Jeremiah, he told me one day, "Ma, he don't look at us like we're real." And he was right. Curtis loved the idea of being needed. But the moment we needed too much, he vanished in the eyes. Like you said he did to you. Then one day, out of nowhere, my ex-husband came back, wanting to make amends, asking about Jeremiah. I told Curtis the truth, and he packed a bag and started acting like it was his house, his rules. I reminded him whose name was on the deed, and he didn't like that one bit. He raised his voice at me once. Just once. And that was all it took. I told him to get out. And when I did, He didn't even argue. He just looked tired. Like a man who knew he had run out of places to run. I had to sit down then. My knees were soft as cornbread. I read the next part out loud. I found out about you not long after he left. Not from him. Lord no, he was never that brave. But from a neighbor who used to live in your town. She said your children turned out real fine. That one's a doctor. Another's a lawyer. Said you never remarried. Said you built your life up from dirt and dignity. And here's the truth, I owe you. I blamed you at first. I thought you were the bitter ex-wife who'd turned him cold. But now I see, you weren't bitter. You were burned. And yet, you never let it burn your children. That kind of strength. I never had it. I raised him wrong, Essie. Or maybe he was always broken and I just held the pieces too long. I don't remember the moment I started crying. Maybe it was the way she said my name without malice. Maybe it was the fact that after all these years, someone finally saw my pain without me having to explain it. I'm sorry, Essie Mae, for ever thinking you were the problem. For believing a man who made leaving look easy. For not seeing the trail of hurt he left behind. You raised him better than I ever could, and I'm sorry I ever thought otherwise. She didn't sign her name, just a simple. A woman who learned too late. Life don't always pay us back in dollars. Sometimes it repays us in truth. Quiet, humbling, bittersweet truth. And sometimes, a woman you never met becomes the mirror you never knew you needed. I never wrote her back. Some wounds don't need reopening. But I whispered a prayer for her. For all the women who learned too late, and for all of us who survive anyway. If this story stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, talk about it. Let it reach someone who might be walking through their own storm right now. And let's keep the conversation going in the comments, because every time we speak up, we make sure the story continues. Subscribe for more stories that dig deep into truth, healing, and the quiet strength of those the world once tried to forget. Because the world may try to silence us, but we were never nothing. We are legacy. We are fire. We are the ones who rose.